All right, look, I woke up this morning. I was in a good mood. I got like 10 hours of sleep last night.
Holy crap. That's a lot of sleep.
I had a bunch of packages out for delivery.
Ooh.
And they all showed up.
Ooh.
And none of them work.
Oh.
Some stuff kind of works. Some of it doesn't work at all. My mood went very south today.
I'm gonna go ahead and say in the realm of things, like in the realm of problems, the ones I don't mind the ones that just don't work at all. And I don't mind the ones, I love the ones that I can fix easily. I look at them like, oh, I know what caused that. The ones that sometimes work and sometimes don't work are the ones that break me.
Yes, that's exactly what I've been living in that space, that liminal space, that limbo for weeks, and it's killing me.
I don't like it's when I was younger, I used to be the kind of person that like if I messed up my computer, I just wouldn't sleep until it was working again.
Totally. Yes. 100%.
I don't do that anymore because it's unhealthy and I just try not to break my computer now.
Yeah. Was that ever underpinned by a sense of indignance for you? Like, do you ever feel angry at the problem and the technology that's causing it? And just like, for me, there is a certain stubbornness that goes along with that stuff of just like, I'm not going to let this fucking inanimate object created by man to serve man is not going to master me. I am going to defeat this thing and I'm not going to rest until I do.
I think for me, it's like, I really don't like entropy.
Okay.
So when things are working, you're fighting against the eventual heat death of the universe. When they're not, you're succumbing to it.
A vain attempt to establish order is always the end goal, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm here for. That's what life is all about.
This podcast got very like philosophy of technology all of a sudden.
Well, I mean, I guess the thermodynamics people are going to be like, well, look, if you're taking entropy, if you're taking entropy away from one system, you're probably adding it to another. So I'm literally killing myself by staying up late to try to fix these computers.
That's a good point. I never thought about it that way. You are a biological piece of technology yourself, it turns out.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the heat death always wins. Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad, and I know that I am breaking established tradition here.
Oh, no. Welcome to the show, Brad. We're glad to have you here.
By referring back to the cold intro, the cold open in the body of the show.
Open? I don't know what you're talking about. I've never heard of this before. We haven't recorded that yet even.
Those intros are recorded by entirely separate people who just happen to sound and be exactly like us.
We actually got machine learning voice robots to replicate our. So we just feed sample scripts into GPT-3, and then it generates the dialogue that the machine learning robots say. I'm
going off on a tangent that is itself spawning off of a tangent here, but I spent a bunch of the afternoon looking through no-name video capture hardware because you can't get any name brand video capture hardware right now.
Nope.
And one of the pages on Amazon, one of the product listings had a video included. And I was like, oh, the video might have some information because this poorly written product description sure doesn't tell me what I'm looking for. And I clicked on it and it was very clearly machine voice reading copy that somebody had written in competent English. It was one of those rebadged, like no name out of Shenzhen or wherever. But like hearing the computer man voice come out of the instructional video on the Amazon page was just a very like profound, like, wow, robots are really expanding into every role.
We have friends who have a startup where you can record like an hour or two of your voice and they feed it into the machine and then it generates an Alexa type thing that will talk with your voice.
Just an hour or two?
It can be very little, very little.
Okay, I've heard about that. We've discussed having it done before, but what I was told was that the amount of reading you would have to do, the amount of data that you would have to provide
less than you would think
was just too much of a pain to deal with. But that seems all right.
Well, so if you use a script that they provide, then they can do it in a really shockingly short period of time.
Okay.
If they're using sampled audio that's clean, then you have to use more.
But they probably structured the script like they have all the phonemes that they need to capture laid out pretty methodically. I'm sure. Okay, that makes sense. Well, at the same time, though, I don't actually. Now that I think about it, maybe it's not so wise to enable somebody else to replicate your voice at will.
I feel like there are some implications that come along with that I maybe am not comfortable with. But the thing that occurs to me is that with that and GPT-3, we could literally pay someone to transcribe the podcasts that we've done so far and then feed that and our voice samples in and generate podcast scripts off of the GPT-3 thing that read. I don't know if we have enough sample data in 45 podcast episodes.
Oh, we're getting there.
But I'm talking to somebody next week and we can find this out.
Oh, boy. This is all the type of stuff that I get really excited about right up until I remember that evil exists in the world. And then I'm like,
we're only going to use this for stupid. We're not going to use it for evil.
Yeah, but what if it falls into the wrong hands?
Well,
all right. I don't mean to derail this episode so much.
The only reason we got a lot of material here.
The whole reason I brought up the intro is I just wanted to say that I acknowledge how ridiculous it is to care about problems like the trinket I bought off of Amazon doesn't work. Like things are rotten right now for a lot of people, and this is a pretty good problem to have, all things considered.
That's true. But when you buy shit, it should work.
Yeah,
that's a fundamental.
I know.
It's one fundamental truth.
I just wanted to give myself a reality check and be like, you know what? Not that big a deal.
You know what I love that works?
What's that?
My keyboard.
Does it? Does it work?
It's really good.
That was a rhetorical question because I can often hear it working just fine.
Look, I'm using cherry red linear keys. They're nice and quiet for mechanical. Okay, we're going to talk about mechanical keyboards today.
Yes.
It is a conversation you and I have had because you were like, why do you want a mechanical keyboard? It seems loud and annoying, and it's like a thing that you would not want.
Let's not put words in my mouth.
Okay.
This is perhaps a skewed paraphrasing of what I actually said.
What do you recall?
Which was probably more along the lines of, you know what, people are perfectly entitled to their hobbies. And I absolutely understand the passion that everyone feels for their topics of choice. I just don't know that I personally see the use case.
This 10-year-old Mac membrane keyboard is good enough for me. I think is what you said.
It's so quiet. Hang on. Let me open the show notes. I'm typing into the show notes right now. Do you hear anything?
You just need a better noise gate if you want to have a loud keyboard.
I will just, let me just say up front, I learned to type on an IBM 286 with one of those keyboards.
Yeah.
You know the ones. Like I totally get it. I fully understand the satisfaction of using keyboards like that.
It's very okay. So yeah, I was on the same boat as you is where I was going with this, because years ago I was like, I don't want a loud clickety clackety keyboard.
It is purely the consideration of I have a microphone here and I need to try to not make too much noise.
Yeah, and I have a small house and I don't want everybody in the house to hear every single time I mash a key. And then I got a mechanical keyboard. Somebody sent one in to us, it tested, and I brought it home and I was like, oh, holy shit, this feels so nice to type on. And I can mash all of the keys at once and it works. And I never lock up the keyboard by pressing four or five keys in the wrong zone at once when I'm playing a game. So I am not an expert on this. I have just dipped my toe in the least possible amount by buying mechanical keyboards that are made by other people and not really having to deal with them, with the exception of one or two that I made for tested years ago. And like, it's very, very satisfying. It's easy. It's also easy to get really, really deep in the weeds here. And it's also easy to spend a fairly offensive amount of money on things that are functionally equivalent to the thing that came free with your PC from Dell when you bought your Dell or whatever. So I think we should, I guess, I don't know. I guess just get into it.
This is a long document, man.
It's a lot of notes. There's a lot of lingo.
The first line of this document is why mechanical keyboards, which, even though we've talked around it a little bit, I think is probably the best place to start.
So then, to understand why, you have to explain how membrane keyboards work, like your Apple keyboard that's on your desk right now. And basically the idea is that there's a membrane, and on the bottom of the membrane, there's some conductive stuff, and it kind of domes up a little bit. And when you mash the key down, which has a spring and a guide on it, it pushes that membrane to close a circuit on the board underneath it. Which means that in order to have a key press happen on your keyboard, you have to actually bottom out that key. You have to push it all the way down, and it has to hit the bottom stop on the key. With a mechanical, you can press it. I'm pressing it. I'm not bottoming out right now.
Interesting.
So, yeah, the keys actuate at a different place depending on the type of switch that's in the key. So
I did. Okay. See, I'm learning something already. I had no idea.
Oh, you're just wait. You get depending on the type of switch you choose, you can get feedback when you type. So like the clicky clacking and the bump that comes with that click often line up with the actuation point for the switch. So you'll feel that bump before you press the key all the way down, and you don't have to actually bottom out the keys when you type, which means you can type faster, more, less finger movement in general, and you're not always smashing the keys into the bottom of the keyboard. People, when I asked the Discord, because we have a keyboard section in the Discord,
I'm sorry, I just have to say that when you created that keyboard channel, I think is the most excited I have seen anybody on the Discord get about a new channel being created.
Look, and just to be clear, we have people who have worked in and around mechanical keyboards since this kind of started. And like, I feel like mechanical keyboard people have been around for probably 10 years now, but it got kind of big in like 2014 when the Cherry patent expired. The patent for Cherry switches expired. And all of a sudden there were a bunch of clones for this standard switch that had been around for a really long time.
What's the typical duration on a patent like that?
25 years, I think. I don't know.
So it was like early 90s when that
probably, yeah.
What was that being used for then? Like one company's keyboards?
One company made all the switches.
That's what I mean is like
mechanical. Yeah.
But there was no subculture back then is what I'm saying, right? Like, well, I guess what I really mean is like, do you know how they were being sold or distributed? Like, where were they ending up? Because people weren't building their own back then, as far as I know, right?
No, but like you could buy you've been able to buy a Keytronics mechanical switch keyboard for the last 30 years. They've been selling those for decades.
Okay.
There's a bunch of companies that made mechanical switches for a really, really long time. They just were not popular because they cost 5 times as much as a membrane keyboard.
That fills in a little kind of historical gap for me because I always assumed it was like, those big clunker IBM keyboards were around in the 80s, which is what I learned to type on. And then I assumed there was a gap there where all you could get were those shitty Dell membranes and so on and so forth. And I assumed that's where the subculture came from, was like, people learned or figured out that they missed that stuff. And you're like, you know what, let's bring that back. But I didn't realize it had been around this whole time.
It kind of never went away, but it was really small. So like when Logitech designed their own mechanical switch, I don't know, like 2012, 2013, 2014. And when we asked them why they didn't just use Cherry switches, they were like, look, if this is a moderately well-selling keyboard for us, it will wipe out the switch supply for the entire world for X number of months. And we can't make a business decision based on that. But now they make a Cherry MX compatible keyboard, right? They're like, everybody's doing that now. So the upshot is the things that people like are you get feedback when you're typing. The travel distance of the keys is configurable based on the switch you choose. They're easy to repair. Like if you have a switch go bad, you don't have to shake-hand the whole keyboard like you do with a membrane keyboard. You just pop out that switch and put a new one in. RSI reasons, because you're not necessarily having to bottom out. You can do what you need, or you can buy a keyboard that's split and all sorts of other crazy stuff. A couple people said that they can be really beautiful. Yeah. Some people said they make typing feel great. One of the common threads was that people wanted, if they're using, it's like a mattress or a chair, it's something they spend a significant amount of their life using, and they want it to be good, and they want it to be customized explicitly for what they want to do. So for example, instead of having, if you're a programmer and you use a bunch of macros to set up files and stuff like that, you can store the macros on the board, on the keyboard, rather than have like a little program that runs on the computer with the macros. So your macros are always there. And then one person reminded me of N key rollover, which it's been so long since I used a membrane keyboard that I completely forgot. But if you mash down like 6 or 7 keys on your Apple keyboard, it's going to freeze up and it's only going to show 3 or 4 of those. Whereas I can do all of these keys at once. And we're in a Google Doc, so I'm mashing the keys.
My brain is sitting here rejecting what you're saying.
Yes.
Like for whatever reason, when I hear you say that, my mind says there's no way that could be true. And now I can tell you,
opened a bunch of shit on my computer.
Now I can tell you that's totally true.
Yeah.
That's shitty.
Yeah.
I should just throw this thing in the trash.
I mean, look, it's not a thing. If you're just typing, it doesn't come up that often.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. But if you're playing games and you have if you're playing a game where you have leans and action items and crouch and all that stuff, I've locked up keys before. Anyway, why not? you got a keyboard with your PC. It was free probably, or it was like $20 if you bought something that's moderately fancy. They're loud, they're expensive, and there's an infinity of products on the market. They're often not all
Sure
available. And like often they're like custom or small batch things. So like instead of like going to Best Buy and looking at one of the 3,000 keyboards that you can buy and clacking on it and seeing what sounds good, you have to pick like what board you choose, what case you choose, whether you do backlights or not, what kind of switch it uses, what kind of keycaps it uses. You know, do you do ABS or PBT or double shot or laser cut or die sub, or like what's your choices? And it gets really confusing really fast. So we're going to help.
It's a deep rabbit hole.
This might be 2 episodes. I'm just going to set that up right now.
There's a lot of bullet points left here.
Yeah, we're through the first like 3 segments here. Okay, so I think start with the board, because that's where everything starts. You have to pick which keyboard you want. And in this case, that means like literally a circuit board with a plate that the keys snap into or lock into, and maybe a case, and often and they come in a bunch of different like literal form factors, like you know, the standard 101/104 key, you know, ANSI ISO 6940 or whatever it is keyboard is the thing that we all grew up with. It has, you know, your 80 number key, alphanumeric keys with shift and enter and all that. Then there's like the little block with the arrow keys and the insert delete keys and the print screen and screen lock and all that stuff. There's function keys across the top. And then there's a numpad with 10 keys on the side that basically like you can do fast number entry.
Yes. Did it go from 101 to 104 when the Windows key came about?
The addition of the Windows key, the menu key, and well, it used to be there was a Windows key on either side. Most keys now have a function key for like changing your function keys to media keys and stuff like that now.
Yeah. Did Apple? Sorry, I don't want to derail this too much. Did Apple have? I'm trying to think back to like the school library when I got to use Macs. Did they have an option key way back when? Did they have like option control?
Open Apple and closed Apple is what option control and alt ended up being.
Okay. I guess what I'm really asking is like, were they ahead of the curve on that, on moving to 104-ish? Did they have those extra keys way back when? My brain is a jumbled mess of...
I think the Apple II was only like an 80 key thing. I don't think it had...
Well, I'm thinking more like, was this early mid 90s Macs? Sorry,
I didn't have a lot of experience with mid 90s. Okay. Like I started using Macs in the late 90s, really more than I didn't use any of the early color Macs or anything like that. But so Control Option Alt, they had analogs, except for they had the command. They had Command, Control, and Alt keys. Windows had Control and Alt at that time period. So adding the Windows key brought key parity to Windows. I guess, that's to Microsoft.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, so form factors. I have to say, like watching that keyboard channel and watching people post pictures of their builds and et cetera, this is maybe the thing that has struck me the most is that the keyboard is an ever shrinking thing. Well, I knew about it. I knew about eliminating the numpad, but holy shit, man, people are really.
Just the beginning. The numpad's just the start. I'm a tenkeyless guy. That's an 80% keyboard is what people call it sometimes. And it's basically like the normal ass keyboard minus the numpad.
Right.
And I like that because of RSI reasons. It means I don't have to hold my hands at a weird angle when I'm using the mouse and the keyboard at the same time. And it means my typing hand can be really close to the mouse compared to having the extra like 4 or 5 inches of
I never thought about that before.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Now it's the easy way to remember this is that usually you're losing about like, since it's 101, 104 key keyboard, the percentages are like 1-to-1 for the number of keys you're losing. A 65% is no numpad, no function keys, but includes the arrow keys and the insert delete home block usually. Which I use a lot. I'm a writer. Insert, delete, page up, page down. I use all those with keyboard shortcuts to move around the page a lot.
Also for like coders would as well, like navigating code and stuff.
The 60% is no numpad, no arrow keys, and no F keys.
Okay.
The 40% is where you get into the real crazy business. These people are maniacs from where I sit. I love these. I've tried to use them. I'm incapable of it. 40% gets rid of the number row key.
Okay.
And then there's also like all sorts of like novel ergonomic variants. The Ergodox is a famous one that's a split columnar. So that means where your normal keyboard that you're looking at right now is staggered, where like the S is kind of between the W and the E and the A is kind of between the Q and the W. Mm-hmm. A columnar means that those keys are aligned vertically without any stagger.
Oh, into columns, you might say.
Into columns, exactly. And like the Ergodox is a columnar split keyboard. So it's two physical halves. Each half is the same. But instead of having like a space bar, there's a little module where your thumb goes, where your thumb can hit what would be like your space bar, your shift keys, your caps lock, your home and insert and delete and backspace and all that stuff. So you're literally just keeping your fingers on the home keys and you're using your thumbs to do all of the extra kind of like, you know, key press plus stuff. I am old enough now that I have decided it is probably too late for me to learn to type new ways.
Sure.
I've tried switching to Colmac. I've tried switching to Dvorak. I tried using an Ergodox for a really long time. I'm just a QWERTY guy at this point. That's the layout of the keys on the keyboard.
Are there any do you know of any cognitive reasons that some of those alternate layouts are supposed to be beneficial? I mean, obviously the mechanical, the physical, you know, RSI and some factors like that are pretty clear, but in terms of like just your brain parsing things, is that a factor at all?
Most of them are designed to reduce mechanical stress on your fingers and wrists.
Okay.
So, for example, like Colmac moves the most frequently used keys under your home keys so that you're doing the dangerous stretches for the keys that you have to press less. One of the nice things about mechanical keyboards is since the keys often are usually the keycaps are movable. The keycaps are the things that go on top of the switches and are what you think of as the keys on your keyboard, probably. You can try different layouts and move the switches around and it kind of works. The thing I find, the other thing about all these smaller variants is that often the keyboards support layers. So you can hit a keyboard shortcut to change from like the main layer, which is the QWERTY layer, down one level to like a thing that puts a numpad on the right-hand side of the like main alphanumeric keys and stuff like that.
That is definitely the most important topic to address with these smaller ones, right? Is like, I just assumed this to be the case, but all that functionality is still accessible in some way, right?
It is, but it's not like using the function key on your laptop to control brightness and stuff like that. It is literally changing the functions of every key on the keyboard.
Oh, interesting.
Often, so you go from layer 1 to layer 2, and layer 2 is the typing numbers layer. Like on a 40% keyboard, you'll have a numbers layer that gives you access to all the symbols that are normally on the numbers row. And you'll probably also have a numpad layer in there too, and maybe some other stuff for games or whatever.
So like, for example, on a 60% that has no function row, it's not like you're holding modifier and hitting, say, numeral 5 to get F5. No. It is literally you are descending to the function layer and then all of the function keys are just active.
Well, it's kind of up to you, right? Like you can do it that way if you want. I think the common wisdom and the way most people I know that use those super small keyboards do is that they set up. Sometimes some people do chording where you hit like 4 keys and it does a different thing than if you hit just 3 of those keys, and it does a different thing if you do just 2 of those keys. Like
that's a lot.
When people say they want this to work exactly, do explicitly what they needed to do, they really mean that. Like you can. Depending on the board you choose, the opportunities for customization and how the keyboard works are limitless.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So can you rewire which switches are which key at the hardware level so it just works universally no matter what you plug it into?
Depends on the keyboard, but like on the Ergodox, which is the one I spent the most time programming, you determine what the key layout is on the firmware level, and then you upload the firmware to the board.
That's awesome.
And then
that's fantastic.
And then it's just there forever.
Because even in my very limited experience with this Apple keyboard and Windows, it treats I don't want to get this backwards here. It treats Command, which should be Alt on a PC keyboard, as Windows, and it treats Option as Alt, which should be Windows. They're backwards. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So, I mean, the nice thing is if you get a nice mechanical keyboard, you can set it to be the way you've become accustomed to by using that keyboard on Windows for the last 10 years.
What I was going to say is doing it at the software level, like it's like you'd have to do like registry hacks or some app that'll do that for you, but like certain games won't respect those settings. Like if you plug it into another machine, you're right back where you started. Like that's a shitty solution. So doing it at the hardware level is super cool.
I know people who use multiple languages also, or multiple typing schemes for different languages. You can assign them to different layers too. So you have like your Spanish layout and your French layout on two different layers, if you're, or German and French if you're in Switzerland, whatever.
All right, last question before we assume move on from form factors. Again, don't want to malign anybody's preferences. I get eliminating the numpad.
Yeah.
Beyond that, is there a point of diminishing returns here?
I think. I mean, look, as with any hobby, you get into extremes and there's like I know people who are programmers who work in specific languages and they use specific keys. And when they're writing code, they know exactly what keys they're going to need. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So they put the parentheses and the brackets and the quotes in the places that they need them. And then they get rid of all the other stuff. And they use these little tiny 40% keyboards to do that. I
absolutely believe there are people who are incredibly efficient with some of these tiny keyboards. From the outside looking in, I definitely wondered if there was an aspect of like minimalism as philosophy rather than utility here.
I think probably both. Right. Okay. I mean, also I think a lot of the 40% keyboards are travel keyboards that maybe if you are going to like a desk at work, you carry that thing and you plug it into your desk at work or whatever. Actually, I mean, I can say from experience, like having to go somewhere and perform on unfamiliar input. I mean, there's a reason like esports players bring their own keyboard and mouse to tournaments and stuff, right? Like you do want the familiar thing because you're going to fumble all over the place if like the height of the keys or the action is different or whatever. Like it's very disorienting. I mean, you probably carried MacBooks for the last decade or so, but I switched to a Windows. I've used a couple of Windows laptops in the last few years, and it is incredibly disconcerting how hard it is to switch to a Razer laptop because their function key is a 3/4 key, and it's where I expect the alt key to be, stuff like that. There's so much muscle. In fact, aside from the noise issue, that's the other reason I use Apple keyboards on PCs is just because going between laptop and PC, there is no adjustment period, so there's something to be said for that. For sure. I like going to work, like, we have a studio set up and occasionally like, the keyboard broke. You might have to go grab whatever you can find at the last minute for the stream. And it's like, oh shit, I have to play StarCraft on this keyboard I'm not familiar with, and that's not going to go well. It's going to hurt your APM for sure. Yeah. Okay. So the next question is, you're going to do a DIY versus pre-built. My assumption is if you're going to do a DIY, you probably don't need to listen to this episode. So we're not going to talk about, we're not going to talk about that too much. But there is more flexibility with a DIY. You can usually get, like, if the vendor you have is selling a DIY board that doesn't have the switches that you want, you can buy just the board, and then you can buy the switches someplace else, assuming they're compatible. You can put them together. If you want really specific features like the ability to have addressable RGB lights, so that you can have your Overwatch will change the color of the lights when you switch from Diva to Brigitte, you're good, right? That sounds like an Overwatch character. Sure, these are all Overwatch characters, I'm sure. But if you're just starting out, like a good place to start is an MX compatible. So a Cherry MX compatible, like pre-built from Corsair or Logitech or Razer or something like that. I think you can't go wrong with that, really. Sure. Let me ask just one question about DIY. Is it safe to assume that you can start as from scratch as humanly possible at this point? Like short of like designing and fabricating your own chips, obviously, but I mean like circuit board, switches, name the component parts of the keyboard. Like, can you get all that? Can you source all that stuff individually and truly build your own at this point? Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Like, I guess circuit board would be the. You can even design the boards you want, but then you're into it. Yeah, like you can get boards made really easily now compared to 10 years ago. Interesting. I mean, that's why this has all happened, right? Is that Chinese fabs will make boards for pretty much anything, and the tools to design the boards are way more accessible than they were in the past. Right. And you can get like a really fast turnaround on those board designs even now.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that stuff. Even just dabbling with the Mister, I've become acquainted with like PCBWay and some of those services where you just literally upload your designs and they create a PCB and send it to you.
Well, and like if you're really into this and are like a board designer, you can even buy a router that you can use to etch your, cut the traces on your own boards, right? Like it's like this is all possible.
Sure.
So yeah, like I feel like the other thing about the pure DIY is often you'll spend a lot of money. So like you're talking about, $100 for a board and $100 for a set of keycaps and 50 cents a switch and a metal case. And like you can spend $300 or $400. Like it's not easy to spend $300 or $400, but if you have very specific taste and you want something specific, it can get expensive. So it's like that's the thing you want to do once you know what kind of switches you like and whether you want to do a backlight and what kind of case you want and stuff like that. The nice thing about this in general is that the resale on these remains pretty good even if you use them. So you can try something. If you don't like it, you can sell it to somebody else and try something else. So, okay, when you're picking this stuff out, here is the thing you need to look at. You need to decide what kind of board you want. Is it programmable? Does it support a backlight? What kind of switches does it use? What layout is it? And once you decide those things and you move on to the picking out the switches and you move on to the picking out the keycaps and go on from there. So I guess we've talked about form factor. I think switches is probably the next thing to dig into, maybe, unless you feel like you have other questions.
No, I will definitely say as an outsider, the switches are the thing you hear about the most. Like MX cherry reds is a phrase that has been rattling around in my head for years without knowing what it was.
Those are the ones I like.
Right. Like that's the jargon I think that most people are exposed to when they kind of come into some contact with this subculture.
Yeah. So switches are the thing that make the keyboard work, obviously. There's two kind of specs. There's the electrical / physical connection with the board. And then there's the keycap mounting. And usually those things are paired. Like you don't get one type of electrical connection and different kind of keycap connection. That would be pretty weird, but you got to be aware. So MX compatible means it's compatible with the Cherry MX switches, which I think the patent expired for that in 2014 or 2015, somewhere around there. And they're really accessible. There are a ton of clones. There's bazillions of Cherry MX compatible switches in all sorts of configurations. So you can get almost anything you want there. There are some other higher end switches like Topre and I didn't write down the other ones, but anyway, there are other higher end switches that use different mounts, different electrical connections, and different cap connections. I for the most part, we're going to talk about Cherry MX and MX compatible stuff today because it is the bulk of the market. And also those other switches are really expensive because the tooling's different for them and all that stuff. The colors. So often you'll see somebody say like it's a Cherry MX red or a Cherry MX blue. The colors indicate what the behavior of the switch. So how much force is required to press it, where the actuation happens, where the switch actually fires, how much noise it makes, and whether it has a tactile bump, whether you can feel that actuation. And so the different colors.
Just to back up for a second. Sorry. Yeah. So you could basically look at Cherry MX as a general form factor. Is that accurate?
Yeah, Cherry MX it's like ATX. So It says, hey, there's physical connectors and electrical connectors in these places. Got it. And it'll fit in this size hole.
Right. But the action of the different types within that is what varies.
Is the color generally. Right. I mean, not everybody uses colors to indicate that stuff, but enough do that's what we're going to talk about here. So I'm on mechanicalkeyboards.com/switches. It is a page that scrolls about 50 times with a bazillion different kinds of switches on it. But like I said, the colors, people generally are following the color scheme that Cherry established with blues and reds and browns and blacks and clears and greens. And the things that we're going to talk about here are, let me go back to my notes page. We're going to start with the force. So the force is usually measured in newtons. A higher number means you have to press harder to get the spring on the switch to go down. And generally speaking, you want a lower force for games and a higher force for typing, because with my Cherry MX red clones on this keyboard, if I rest my hands on the keyboard, sometimes I'll accidentally mash D a bunch or space bar a bunch or whatever. The next thing is the actuation, which is where the press happens. On the reds, it's like halfway down the stem. So that means you can actually type. And if you're watching as you type, you can you can train yourself to let your fingers off before you bottom out the key, which is one of the two places that the keys make noise. One is on the switch clicking. The other is when the key bottoms out. Next is the noise. Cherry MX Blues are the famous switch for being clickety clackety, and they have a mechanism inside that makes a clicking noise at a certain percentage of the push, which often is either before or after the actuation. Yeah, it's that I hear it in the background on that keyboard.
I was debating when to bring that up.
No, it's.
I guess I should just give a shout out right now.
Yeah, you can shout it out.
Yeah, we started that keyboard channel on the Discord, and one of the most prolific participants there is Twinkle Twinkie,
Yes.
Who did me the incredible kindness of building me a custom mechanical keyboard out of spare parts that he had,
like Frankenstein parts.
Yes. Well,
No.
I don't want to conjure the image of something built out of the parts of cadavers. This is it's very, very nice. It is extremely well done.
Yeah,
it is. I'm going to say better than anything you can buy in a store.
I mean,
with my sample size of one keyboard,
they gave you a bunch of different keys so you can see what the kind of different feels are like, which is the important thing
of this. And yeah, since you mentioned the switch, just the caps lock is the
clicky. So you hear there's, I don't know if this will come through in the audio recording, and I might cut this out if it doesn't, but when you hit that, there's two sounds, right? You hear the click.
Yeah, you hear a mechanical click,
and then you hear the key hitting the bottom of the bed,
which is a physical smack of plastic on plastic, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then the tactile bump. So you can have tactile keys that have a bump that you can feel the click that don't make a noise, but you can't have clicky keys that don't produce a bump, or at least I'm not aware of them.
Okay.
And you want to pick the thing that's kind of right for you. Like if you're working in a hospital where there's a bunch of people and you need people to be quiet, probably just keep a membrane keyboard, because these are all going to be louder than you want.
Sure.
But if you I don't want to make a noise and annoy the people in my house, so I went with a linear switch, which means it's a straight press all the way down with a little more tension at the bottom than the top. But the actuation is like halfway down, and it doesn't make a ton of noise compared to like something that has an actual mechanism to make noise.
Right. No click in there.
Exactly.
I have to say, I mean, ironically, or perhaps not, the loudest one is also the most satisfying one to press.
Oh, it's like the click. It feels good when you feel amazing. The click in your fingers.
Yeah, it's the closest thing to my memories of those old IBM keyboards is the one with the click. But of course, it's also the one that I can't bring anywhere near a microphone.
It's kind of funny because, like, as I was doing this, I was thinking about my favorite keyboard, and it was probably the keyboard on an Apple II, which was the first real computer I got to spend time with as a kid. And like, it has those round, weird shaped keys, and it felt so good to touch. Anyway, most people when they're starting out go with a quieter switch unless you specifically want something clacky. Cherry browns, cherry reds, cherry pinks. Brown is a linear. Hold on, I'm going to get my cheat sheet up here. Brown is a tactile, so it has a bump. It's a medium low pressure key, so you don't have to push too hard. So it's okay for gaming. It's a nice middle of the road switch for people who are starting out, because you do get the bump, but you don't have the click that comes with it. Red is just a straight linear. It's a little bit less force, and you don't feel the bump. You don't hear anything other than the key bottoming out. And then pink is a even quieter red. I think Cherry doesn't call them pinks. I can't remember what they call them. They call them silent reds. And then the blue is a clicky. It's nice for gaming keyboards also, if you don't mind the noise. But it's a clicky key with a bump and the noise that's about the same force as the browns, I think.
I'm sorry, I'm over here getting distracted by my keyboard. It's
it's okay.
It is very entertaining and satisfying to mess with.
It's pressing those buttons feels good. That's why people like these.
That's right. It's kind of it's like almost a de-stressor in a way. There's something kind of zen about it.
It is very. It's very satisfying. It's like having a good switch to flip, right?
Yes.
But you have 104 to 46 of them, and you can mash them at 130 or 140 words per minute. So, the last thing when you're picking switches is if you have a backlit keyboard, you have to get switches that are compatible with the backlight, so that they have their clear tops. If you put a black top switch on a LED, it's not going to do anything, and you're going to be sad.
Sure.
I feel like most of the switches you buy now are backlight compatible because backlights have gotten popular. But if you just pay attention when you're buying your switches.
Oh, is that why? I assume that's why when I pop one of these keycaps off, the thing surrounding the switch underneath is translucent?
Yes, that's
transparent.
exactly it. Whereas like I have some old Cherry MX Reds here holding up to your camera, and they're solid black.
I see. Okay.
Sometimes they'll have like a light channel depending on what the spec of the switch is. If you're going to get into backlighting, do some reading before you buy anything.
Sure.
Okay, so we've got keys. If you don't know what kind of switch you want and you want to try something, you can go on any of the mechanical keyboard sites or Amazon and buy what's called a key tester, which is like just a bunch of switches that aren't wired up to anything in a grid that you can mash and try doing some pretend typing on to see which ones you like the way they feel and how they click.
That sounds like my stress removal device.
I bought a tester with every switch that was readily available in like 2014 or 2014 or 2015. It had like 15 switches on it. Now it would be a huge wall-sized grid. Everybody's making switches.
Sure.
And I think that's it. I think that's the switches.
Okay. A little easy to get lost in the weeds on that stuff, but
look, it's all weeds.
It's just weeds on top of weeds.
Weeds all the way down.
The weeds growing out of other weeds.
And yeah, it's worth mentioning there are other switches than the Cherry stuff, like the Topre or Topra. I don't know how you say that. They make these amazing, really, really high end, super nice, straight linear feeling switches that like they feel great, but they're crazy expensive in my experience. And you know, they have a weird cap connector, so you can't get like it's harder if you get less common switches. You're going to be limited in the keycap selection.
I was going to ask, is it just keycaps? Like, could those still be used with most any chassis and PCB and so forth?
Well, no, because the PCB will have specific mechanical and electrical connectors.
You won't even be able to,
on the switch type
to mount it there. Okay.
And we didn't talk about snap-in switches or hot swap switches versus solder-in switches. It used to be that you had to solder everything in place. Now most everything is hot swap, so you just snap it in. You have a little tool that lets you pop it out. But yeah, that's a whole other. Don't buy something you have to solder when you're just starting out.
Yes.
Having done that, it was great fun building an Ergodox and then having to realize that you had messed up the soldering on 15 of the diodes and doing it all over again.
I think you're being sarcastic. I don't think you've considered that fun at all.
I like soldering. It's satisfying.
That's my personal read.
Yeah, it's fair. Okay, so keycaps. Make sure they fit your board. There's a lot. This is one of the things that when you start looking at this stuff is you realize that keyboards are way more complicated than you ever realized. Okay. Did you know that there are different keycap profiles?
I did not know that.
Well, you have what's called a chiclet keycap profile on your keyboard, on your Apple keyboard.
Oh, on the Apple. Okay.
But the one that you're holding there, the mechanical one, is an OEM profile. So it's.
I have heard that term chiclet keyboard for a very long time, but I wasn't 100% sure. Is that the height? It's
that they're all the same size.
Okay.
Like all of so yes. If you look at a normal alphanumeric key, like at the G key, it's called a 1U key. That means it's one wide and one tall. Your shift key on the left side is usually like a 2 or 2.5 wide two and a half U wides, whereas the one on the left side is maybe 3. It looks like on my keyboard, or 2 3/4 maybe. And so you're looking at the width of the key. You're looking at the profile of the face that you hit with your fingers. Some keyboards will slant all of the keys away from you or all of the keys towards you.
Okay.
There's some that are curved. So if you have like an ergonomic keyboard, it might have a curved profile where the keys on the top rows, the actual keycaps are taller than
interesting
than the ones on the lower rows, so that you have the right angle on your keys when you're typing.
Sure.
And it can get really complicated. The upshot is not all keycaps are compatible with all board layouts, because if you put the wrong keycaps on, you'll end up with like a weird stair step thing that is really uncomfortable to type on and doesn't feel good at all.
Sure.
So you have to be aware of what kind of keycaps you're looking for. Typically, when you're starting, even if you're building it yourself, buy a kit from one vendor that has the board, the case, the switches, and the keycaps. And then if you want to start customizing after that, go nuts. Let's see the materials. There's a bazillion different materials.
You don't say.
ABS plastic is the most common. So if you look at your keys, like this Logitech keyboard I'm using right now, the keys on top have gotten shiny, and that indicates that shine from just the wear of your fingers rubbing the keys is an ABS thing.
Okay. And you have you've literally worn material off the top of those, right? I assume that's why they're shiny.
I had always assumed that was an oil thing.
Okay. But
I've been told recently that it is the ABS eroding just slightly.
That's okay. That's what I assumed.
The PBT is another plastic that people often use. It's usually more expensive. They can do some neat things with PBT, like shoot the plastic into the molds twice. So they do one shot of the PBT that's one color and one shot that's the other, for doing things like transparency on the letters. Sometimes it's an aesthetic thing where there'll like be a gradient on each key, so they look like creamsicle ice cream or something. It's really cool. Whether the tops are the letters are lasered on. Some people just do blank keycaps. Some people do lasered on keycaps where there'll be one color plastic and then you etch off the top and you get the contrasting color underneath.
Yeah. The keys on this keyboard, the Twinkle Twinkie sent me, they're black. They're like pretty standard looking aesthetically, but lettering is on the front of the key, like down in the well where the key actuates.
Yeah. So those are probably lasered would be my guess.
Okay.
You can dye sub, which is a type of printing process, which will apply the color on the top. And like, this is the keycaps, like switches. If switches are a purely aesthetic choice, you pick the thing that you want based on the noise you want to make and how you want it to feel and how hard you want to press. This is a style choice often. So like you can get like keycap runs, the board run. So just to be clear, oftentimes if you want something really specific, the people who make these will make 1 or 2 runs a year, and you'll have to order it in advance and then wait 6 weeks or 6 months or however long it takes for the boards to be manufactured and shipped over from China. Keycaps are the same. Like you can order a set of keycaps and wait for 3-4 months for the delivery, because they have to set up the dies and they have to do the shooting and all that stuff. And it's like a Kickstarter situation in a lot of cases.
You might have gotten me.
Oh yeah.
This is the first moment. There's a first moment that I have had since this whole thing began.
You just like waiting for stuff?
No. Where I stopped and thought, what if I got some new keycaps for this thing?
Yeah.
What if I went out and got like a nice little color coordinated set of, like, maybe the modifiers could be a slightly different color from the other?
Yeah.
Shit.
What if I made it look like the VAX terminal that was the first computer I used when I was at college?
Totally. Like I had been waiting for a time to bring this up, and now seems like the time. But even setting backlights aside, scrolling through that keyboard channel and seeing people's different custom designs and stuff, like there are some like gorgeous looking designs in there. Honestly, like some really like amazingly attractive color combinations and different types of layouts and stuff. Like some really nice, like some of it is almost like food like I would almost describe some of these keyboards as delicious looking. You know what I mean?
So there was one, I think it was a Wirecutter poster. It's Kimber Stream's keyboard right now. It has a Hyperlight Drifter aesthetic, including like the Drifter font that they used in the game. on the keys. So yeah, like you can get real nerdy and weird, or you can have just something that's completely kind of it's not representative of everything, just as attractive and nice.
Yeah.
So the keycap sitch, you can spend a lot of money and also have a lot of fun with keycaps. I think keycaps are pretty cool. And that's it for that. That's pretty much the gist. Let's see. Did we talk about backlights? I guess we didn't.
I used the term backlight just now, but maybe that was not correct. Like we talked about lighting earlier. Are there other types of, is there underlighting and so forth? Or?
Well, so the backlighting on keys on mechanicals usually is an LED that sits directly underneath the switch and is like the lights piped up through it. Sometimes you'll just use that as a back. Like if you put keycaps that are not translucent and aren't designed for backlight, that will just sit underneath. It'll make light come out from underneath the keys and can look really cool.
Okay.
Often they'll be single color. So like on an inexpensive keyboard, you'll plug it in, it'll be the same color regardless. Sometimes there are RGB lights under there that you'll program when you program the layout of the keyboard. So you'll say, okay, I want this layer to be red and this layer to be blue and this layer to be yellow. And that way, that's a good way to indicate when you're switching between layers as well, which is nice.
Sure.
The kind of on the consumer goods front, the game companies have for a long time made keyboards that are addressable on the fly. So you can run a program on your computer that serves as like a translation layer, and they provide APIs to game developers so that, like I said, when you switch your character from Diva to Lucio, the color scheme changes from pink with the Diva keys lit up to yellow and green with the Lucio keys lit up. And like, it's really cool.
Yeah.
My Logitech keyboard, when I turn on PUBG, it turns yellow, which tells me that my mouse sensitivity is set right for that game.
Oh,
right.
Wow.
It's a dopey thing because you never look at the keys, but also
I didn't want to say it, but yeah.
But also it gives me an immediate way without leaving the game to make sure that my shit is set up right for the game that I'm playing, which is something that most people probably don't care about. I acknowledge that. If you're doing, there are now some boutiques making addressable dynamic lights. The problem with a lot of addressable RGBs on a keyboard is that they draw a bunch of power compared to normal LEDs, because each one has a little processor on it. And so like some of the Corsair addressable keyboards have two USB-A plugs, or they require USB-C because you can get more power with USB-C. For example, my Logitech keyboard that I'm using right now doesn't work with the Mister unless I turn the backlight off.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the cases are a whole other world of nightmares. You can get plastic cases. You can laser cut your own cases out of acrylic or bamboo if you have access to a laser cutter or a router. You can 3D print cases. You can buy cases that are milled out of aluminum or other metals. You can make, presumably somebody's made some sort of carbon fiber case, something like, I don't know.
I want to see some really like nice classic looking woodworking.
Yeah. Like I love a good bamboo case where it comes, and there's profile choices on that as well. You can go with a switch exposed case that has the like, it's just a flat plane that the board is flush with, and then the switches are all exposed, and those are going to be probably a little bit louder. You can go with something that goes up and kind of scoops up around the sides of the keys before they're even pressed. Those may be a little bit quieter. You won't get backlight on those. It'll only come up through the keys. Like you can get nuts. You can get really crazy.
I'm over here Googling wooden keyboard cases now. I'm just looking for like a nice stained mahogany or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I was hoping to surely I thought someone would have done the actual keycaps out of wood, but I'm not seeing that yet.
So the keycaps are usually injection molded plastic. So you might have something that has like a dye sub texture on it that's applied that looks like wood.
Okay.
But it's probably going to look janky.
Okay.
It would be really expensive to mill something as precise as keycaps out of actual pieces of wood.
Those are so small. The tools I'm sure exist, but would be tough to
it would be spendy.
Yeah.
If you let's see, accessories, you can get fancy cables. You can get a wrist rest. You can get a wrist rest made out of wood that matches your case. A lot of people. I actually have like a cheap 10 numpad for tax season when I have to do a lot of spreadsheet work.
Just separate USB.
It's just a separate USB. I keep it in my desk when I need it. I plug it in. When I don't, I chuck it back in the drawer.
Do you use, since you mentioned wrist rests, I assume you probably have something?
Yeah, I bought a cheap Griffin. It's like a graffiti is what it's called. It's from Griffin. No, it's a graffiti.com wristband I got from Amazon. Well, I'll put a link in the show notes.
Okay.
It is held up surprisingly well.
Yeah.
I kind of want to make a wrist rest that has a bunch of spikes in it so that I'll stop using the wrist rest. Like just put like a bunch of needles or nails or something, just kind of to remind me, hey, dumbass, your wrist should be higher than this. But maybe I'm too old to learn new tricks.
Is that not in itself also like artificially like holding your arms up, elevating them? Would that also not cause some stress over time, or
the pad?
No. Like,
well, I mean, if your chair and your table are set up right.
Oh, well, I see what you're saying. Okay.
You want everything to be at the right angles.
You don't mean literally keeping your arms held up,
I just mean
adjusting your posture so your arms are at the right angle.
Like, yeah, the thing they tell you is that there shouldn't be an angle on your wrist when you're typing. Like it should be a straight line from your radius and ulna out to your hand bones.
Sure. I bought, speaking of that stuff being durable, I bought like no name. I probably went to Office Depot or something back when Giant Bomb launched 12 years ago. I just bought a standard like gel mouse wrist rest and also one for the keyboard. I used to have terrible wrist problems, pain and stuff. And it all just went away when I got those wrist rests.
So I use a 3M gel wrist rest for my mouse. I had to replace the old wide one that I had when I went from the 104 key to the 10 keyless, which was a little bit of a bummer. But let's see, people, if you want to make them quiet, different plates, the plate that goes between the keycaps and the board, acrylic or polycarbonate tends to be quieter than metal for obvious reasons. You can also add things to the keys. You can put these little rubber O-rings on top of the stem in the keycap, and that slows the bottoming out so that when you're pressing the key, it hits something soft and quiet instead of just plastic clacking on plastic. You can also lube the switches, which is, I've never done that. That sounds like madness to me, but
I believe that I don't quote me on this, but I believe Twinkle did some lubrication on these.
Your switches have been lubed.
Yes, that's my understanding. I don't know. I wonder how we would have to ask him. I wonder how long something like that lasts. I wonder if that's something that would, wear off or break down over time, or if that's something that's fairly permanent.
So the lubes that they use typically are Krytox 205G0, which is bad because it has PTFE in it, the precursor for Teflon, which is an environmental nightmare.
Yikes.
And Tribosis 204 is the other one that is less environmentally tragic. But the PTFE one should last forever. It literally never nothing can make that shit degrade. You can fire it into the sun. It'll probably still be around a few million years.
Why are all the best things so bad for you?
I mean, look,
is that the type of thing? Is that the type of thing you are yourself going to be exposed to if your keyboard has it? Or you're just saying like,
fine for you.
It's just bad if you like threw it in a landfill and it seeps into the groundwater.
The manufacturing process for it is horrific.
I see. So it's not even something you're going to come in contact with.
Yeah, no, it's like, those places in Fallout when you walk up and there's a watering hole and there's a bunch of like 7-legged cows there.
Yep.
That's what it's like outside PTFE manufacturing places.
Great.
Yeah. Also, if you put the keyboard on, like if you have a glass or metal or even wood desk surface and you get one of those full desk mouse pads that goes underneath your keyboard, that can bring the noise way down. So something to think about. I think that's it.
Okay.
I think that's the, if you want to start out, novelkeys.xyz, drop.com, which used to be Massdrop and is responsible for a lot of people getting into mechanical keyboards, including multiple people in our Discord.
I'm not gonna go there.
You should go there. It's really cool.
I don't need to see it.
You can't buy any of it right now is the good news. You have to wait a few months.
That is good. That is good news. But the keyboard looks just fine. It's a nice sleek black. I don't need to put anything else on it. It looks just fine.
Nice it would be with a bunch of backlights and stuff though. Bamboo case.
Wait,
rich Corinthian leather.
Could I add a backlight to this keyboard?
Probably not. That's usually difficult.
Okay.
But also, like I said, there are good relatively standard keyboards from Corsair and Razer. The Logitech one, they don't advertise switch compatibility, which is a little bit worrisome for me, but it does. I have put MX switches into this thing and it worked okay. Your mileage may vary. And like if you're in a place where you can leave and go to a store, Best Buy has a surprising number of mechanical Corsair and Razer keyboards on display, so you can go try them out. But I would strongly encourage you to buy a switch tester, and spend a little bit of time with it if you're thinking you're going to spend $150 or $200 on a mechanical keyboard.
Sorry, I don't mean to get off on a tangent here. I just started trying to Google about Best Buy's financial fortunes. When you mentioned that they have a bunch of mechanical keyboards out, it made me remember that I feel like I read that Best Buy is like kind of on the upswing again.
I feel like they've adapted to our new nightmare world pretty well.
Yeah.
In that they're basically just using their showrooms as like curbside pickup stores in affected areas now.
Yeah. I should look into that a little bit more. I have one more keyboard question.
Yeah, what you got?
This is probably more relevant to people who are doing the DIY thing.
Yeah.
But I was wondering what kind of wireless options exist. I mean, I would assume they're like really
very few.
Even in the retail, like the Logitech Corsair type space, like the pre-made.
So let's see. Logitech released a low profile mechanical switch wireless keyboard. Generally, they don't do this because the power requirements are pretty high.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. For backlight, especially, you can get Bluetooth. Sorry, if you have a backlight, you're not going to have wireless. If you don't have backlights, yes, there are a lot of Bluetooth mechanicals.
Okay.
And you can choose that on the board. I don't know that this exists, but I wouldn't be surprised if it does. If there's not just a little dongle box you can plug into your keyboards, because one of the nice things about a lot of these keyboards is they'll have like a mini USB or micro USB port on them, so that the cables are detachable too. And I wouldn't surprise me if there's just a box you can plug in that makes any keyboard Bluetooth.
Got it.
But yeah, if you're thinking about like getting a mechanical keyboard for your Mac, most of them you're probably going to want Bluetooth, would be my guess.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right.
I think that's it. I apologize in advance for anything that I got wrong. And I have to really shout out the entirety of the keyboard and mechanical keyboard and other input devices channel on the Discord.
Yes.
Because I was making my notes in public view for the first time. I guess this is another patron perk.
That's right.
Actually,
influence the content. It's real snake eating its own tail kind of business here.
Look, if the snake's not going to eat its tail, who is?
Yeah. So that crowd is incredibly passionate and incredibly knowledgeable. I wanted to read a little note that he included with this keyboard he sent me. Because I think this made me understand that subculture probably better than anything else.
Okay.
It says this keyboard has been sent to B. Shoemaker for the express purpose of introducing him to mechanical keyboards. I do not take any responsibility hereafter for any financial or personal liability that may be encountered in the endless search for one's end game keyboard. Like that statement right there kind of made it click for me. It's like, oh, well, everybody is out there chasing like their dream perfect keyboard, right?
Well,
and like they're never quite going to get there, but they're going to just keep rebuilding and rebuilding to get a little bit closer.
For what it's worth, like I got a taste of this and then was like, okay, this one's good enough for me. I like the lights. The keys feel good. Moving on. So you can dip in and dip out. You know, it's not like they're always pulling you back in.
Sure.
But yeah, everybody in that Discord, including Twinkle Twinkie and Xander and a bunch of other folks, when I posted the shared doc, they were coming in and helping correct me when I was wrong, and that said, any mistakes are mine. I own them, so don't yell at Brad or people in the Discord. Just come yell at me.
I like this policy. Let's stick with this.
Yeah, it was hugely helpful. And part of it is that while there are some really good resources like deskauthority.net, which has a really great wiki that explains a lot of the differences between the switches and the terminology, the terminology is a little more in flux than a lot of things that aren't quite as grassroots as this are. And it gets kind of challenging. And then also, there's a whole world of like weird mods that we could get into that I just kind of skipped over here, like taking bits from one Switch and putting them in the bits from another Switch. So you have something that has like the force required of a Cherry MX green with the clickiness of a blue, or the linear throw of a red, or whatever it is. So yeah, I guess if you have questions, send them in. As always, the email address is techpod@content.town.
I just want to throw out, if anybody has indulged in this hobby to gross excess, I would love to hear about it. Like,
great.
If you just have stacks of keyboards around yourself, like if you ever just woke up one morning and you were like, why do I have all these keyboards? Like, I would love to hear who has gone so far. You know what I mean? Like you're
hoarding your keyboard hoarding stories. Keyboarding.
Key hoarding. That's
key hoarding.
Yes, we figured that. Yes. Finally got an episode topic or title. But yeah, like your average use case, like you need like what, one, maybe two keyboards
I think 2 or 3 is reasonable even. Yeah.
But there's gotta be people out there with like a dozen.
Does somebody have like one of those carousel trays, like the Ferris wheel style ones where like they crank the side and it just pops up this is my typing emails keyboard. Right. This is my browsing the web keyboard. Right. This is my playing first person shooters keyboard. Yes. But this is my Space Sim keyboard.
Who out there has started building custom shelving to display all of your extra keyboards? That's what I want to know.
I have seen in the past pictures of keyboards in frames, like shadow boxes on the wall.
I know, like I said, some of those keyboards look good enough to eat, so I'm not surprised. Yeah.
Delicious.
Yeah.
As always, thanks to all of our patrons for your support.
Totally.
Without you all, the show wouldn't be as possible.
Yeah, like quite literally this week.
Yeah, I literally, having the document open saved me probably 5 hours of reading wikis and message boards and getting to the stuff that actually matters rather than the stuff that like you think matters when you're just doing the surface dive. So it was incredibly helpful, and thank you all. But extra special thanks to our executive producer level patrons, Andrew Cotton, David Allen, and Jacob Chappell. And everybody on the Discord and who supports the show. We appreciate it, whether you're a patron or not. Thank you all so much for listening.
Absolutely. Yes.
And thanks for telling friends. I've been seeing a lot more people telling friends. I don't know what we did last week when we were talking about this, but a bunch of people signed up. So thank you to all the new folk. The Discord has been, it's kind of like, it's funny because like, I see people asking questions and then I see the same people answering questions in different channels every week. And it's like everybody's kind of bringing what they know and taking what they don't know. And it makes me feel happy and warm and fuzzy inside every time I see it. So
it is a positive, happy, fun, good time.
Exactly. And that'll do it for us this week, I guess, Brad.
Yeah. How are you living? Feeling good these days? Should I not have asked?
No, I mean, look, we've been dog sitting for some friends, and that's nice because there's an animal around, and it's nice to have animals.
I think for whatever reason, I feel like you're the one that I see the most throwing out a day count out there. Like, I think you are keeping a closer watch on how many days it's been than anybody else I know.
We crossed 150 on Monday.
Yes, I think I saw you mentioned it was like day 148, obviously, a couple days before that. Yeah. It was just like, wow, really? That's
all Gina.
That's startling.
Well, we started on March 6th, which was a week before most of Northern California, because I was looking at numbers and was like, fuck this, we're pulling out. But yeah, no, things are like, I don't know. You know what I have more problem with than anything else? What should I have for lunch?
Yeah, I could see it.
Like I end up eating a hot dog or some garbage, like a peanut butter and banana sandwich more often than not, because I'm like, I don't know what to have for lunch.
Yeah, you can only make a turkey sandwich so many different ways.
Yeah, so post your best lunch. Send us your lunch suggestions. I want some lunch ideas.
Ooh, that's a good. Oh, you know what? Just doing some brainstorming right now. Like you mentioned doing another food episode recently.
Yeah,
and I was like, I don't know what new angle we could put on food because we're not chefs or anything, but like. Quarantine food. Like I would love to hear about people's quarantine eating strategies. If you've got any way to dress up your drab ass diet.
Yeah.
Because you can't go out and get interesting food very often.
I see people posting about eating salads every day. And I'm like, man, that is way too much work for me. Like at lunchtime, I want to go in and chuck a hot dog in some boiling water and then eat that in a bag of chips in like 10 minutes.
What if you skip the boiling water? What if you just go hot dog straight from fridge to mouth? I know people who are doing it. I'm not going to name and shame here. But.
That's a no for me, dog.
Yeah.
I have put the hot dog in the microwave oven before.
Okay.
You got to slice the top or else it explodes.
Probably. You know what? I'll allow it. You know what? Who's going to know? Who's going to know?
I mean, I always have my secret shame.
Unless you say it on a podcast that goes out.
Yeah, nobody's listening to this. So we'll edit this part out. See you next week. Bye.
All right, I know this is self-indulgent at this point, but it's Mr. related. Let me just ask real fast.
You were the one last on the Patreon episode. You were like, I think we got to stop talking about the Mr. so much, but I'm going to allow it just this once, Brad.
You asked me pre-recording this show if I was powering my Mr. off of USB, which is one of the things I'm mad about, and I said, nope, let's just record it. Okay. Do you have a power switch? Oh, well, you mounted yours in a case, right? So you must have a power switch.
Yeah.
So I got a set of power switches, like barrel plug, kind of pass through, with just a little on-off toggle. And I got some barrel plug to USB.
Okay.
To use with like an iPad charger or whatever.
That's what I have. One of those I got from Amazon. It was Starkey.
The switches work with the AC adapter. The USB cables work with a wall plug, like USB wall plug. Okay. The switches do not work with the USB cables.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's got to be a voltage drop thing, right? It's just one too many. It's one too many connectors that it's passing through, and it's just dropping enough voltage that it won't. Like, it kind of powers on, sort of, but not stably. Like, it actually behaves in some pretty horrifying ways. Like my DualShock 4 that was plugged into the USB was like turning on and off randomly. Like, it was clearly kind of getting enough power, but not really.
So mine is plugged into an Anker USB port, and it's one of the newer ones that has like five USB A plugs and one USB C plug, and it supports not Qi, but the USB 3 power standards, like the one we talked about a few months ago. Like, so it can charge a switch basically. Right. And it works with the Mr. But when I plugged it into like an iPad charger, an old iPad charger, that didn't go so well.
Interesting.
But I have mine. I'm doing mine so I can plug my Mr. in on my desk when I want to capture it or play in here. Right. And I don't have to unplug the power brick from behind the TV when I'm playing in the living room.
I think I should just give up on this. I should send the USB cables back and just buy another AC adapter, right? Isn't that the right call?
Or you could buy more stuff. You could just buy the right USB power adapter. And also, do you need the power switch? Just unplug it when you're plugging on your desk.
It's such a pain. Like, I have to, it's the way I have to contort myself to get under the desk to see where that plug is, to plug it and unplug it.
No, dude, unplug it from the back of the Mr.
You can fumble a toggle switch in the dark. This is beyond my skills to do blind, unfortunately, but.
You sound so defeated.
It really ruined my afternoon. I'm in search of absolution, and I have not found it yet. Don't even get me started. Don't even get me started on the stupid active video repeater I bought to try to fix my capture issue.
Look, the switch that I made is just a big 5-volt switch with an LED in it.
Wait, you made a switch?
I bought the switch and then I wired it into the back of the Mr. case. Also, and it's a big toggle and it lights up when it's on. It makes me very happy.
This is the first time I've really come to realize how much the Nintendo Switch has destroyed our ability to talk about DIY electronics.